Welcome to a special hard talk from India. I'm in Delhi, proud capital of the nation, but also a city that over the past year has been tarnished by an association with sexual violence. Now, you may remember that just over a year ago, a young female student died after a brutal gang rape. That prompted protests across this nation, people demanding the government take action to end gender violence. And at the heart of that campaign, my guest today, women's rights activist Kavita Krishnan. What does India need to do to make this country safer and more equal for women? Kavita Krishnan, welcome to Hard Talk. The brutal bus gang rape of the young woman in Delhi some 13 months ago, do you believe it has proved some sort of watershed moment here in India?
In some senses, yes. I think that it marked a moment when we became aware of a shift in people's perception, at least in a large section of people, about gender violence, about sexual violence, and especially about the phenomenon of victim blaming. Because you've had protests against rape earlier, and demanding punishment for the rapists and so on. Those slogans weren't very new. But what was new last year was that you had a large number of voices, especially young voices, raising spontaneous slogans on the streets against victim blaming, against the habit of saying that women should behave in a particular way in order to be safe. And to me, that is a phenomenon which I've seen, happening in other countries as well, with the slut walk protests and so on. But here in India, on the scale that we saw it last year, it was an encouraging moment.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that politicians who didn't get it at the beginning, going back to the fallout in the immediate aftermath of the gang rape and the death of the young woman, those politicians who didn't get it were punished by public opinion. I'm thinking of the former Chief Minister, Sheila Dikshit, who talked about how women who went out late at night were, to use her strange word, being very adventurous.
They punished Sheila Dikshit, but I think that the phenomenon of politicians not getting it is much larger. And today, I'm standing at a moment when the Chief Minister, who has replaced her, is using rape analogies in his speech.
So what, you're suggesting to me that this indicates that actually the politicians, even those politicians who profess to be committed to human rights, haven't really changed when it comes to attitudes to women?
I think it's a very hard battle, and it's being brought home to me at this moment because you do have a new, very popularly elected government in Delhi, which has come on the back of a lot of aspirations of people, and people really expected change. And they were talking about change. It's a sort of Obama moment, okay, where people were talking about hope and change. And yet it seems to me that that change comes and stops at the door of patriarchy. You have the same moralizing kind of comments that make a distinction between the slut and the good woman, and try to tell women that we will keep you safe from the sluts, and you behave well and you will be kept safe. And that is such an odious thing against which the slogans were raised last year. But it doesn't seem to me that people have been listening, the politicians.
In other words, you want equality. You don't just want protection, you want genuine equality.
Yeah, in fact, that's the slogan. The slogan raised last year was very exciting because it said fearless freedom. It said you want to protect something, protect the fearless freedom of women, of course, but also of gay people, transgender people, of people who don't seem so respectable. All those vulnerable sections who face bias and discrimination. We were asking for fearless freedom for them all.
But it's hard to be fearless, isn't it? I'm just thinking personally for you, it's hard to be fearless when the backlash from some of the things you've been saying over the past year has been so extreme. In one online internet forum, you were threatened with rape.
Yes, and I've realized since then that on the social media, that isn't the last time that happened. It's happened several times since then. So
are you fearless today?
I don't fear those people who make the threats on the social media and so on. But I think I'm right now at a moment when I'm more fearful of how the very issue of rape is being used to justify violence on women of other communities, for instance, religious minorities in India, or to sort of stigmatize young men and consensual relationships of women with young men. So the fear of rape, let me be clear here, the fear of rape is being conflated in a certain brand of politics here in India with the consensual relationships with people, with men from oppressed castes or men from religious minorities. And we are seeing terrible violence being meted out on the oppressed Dalit castes in Tamil Nadu, as well as more recently on the religious minorities in Muzaffarnagar, very close to Delhi. And I was seriously fearful to see that the slogans being used to stoke up that violence were, we need to keep our mothers and daughters safe from those men. And to me, this goes against the slogans of freedom that we were raising, slogans of equality that we were raising.
It's complicated,
yes.
But there seems to be one truth that is actually relatively simple, and that is that in India today, the system, and I'm thinking of policing, the nature of investigations, and the nature of the judicial system, militate against women reporting rape and believing that they will ultimately get justice
yes.
through the system. Has that changed at all in the last year?
You have had more people reporting, more women coming forward to report. I still think it's rape is terribly underreported.
I mean, the official figures, the last ones I've seen suggest perhaps 25,000 rapes a year in India. Now that figure cannot be credible given the size of the country and all of the systematic research which suggests that vast numbers of women experience rape and sexual assault, and yet most of them, it seems, do not believe they can report it.
And the experiences of the last few months, of women who have come forward to make complaints, for instance, of sexual harassment against very powerful people, or even of rape against, media editors, against judges, Supreme Court judges, and so on.
And to be clear, that is happening even today. I mean, we
yes.
talk about change mindsets, but that's still happening.
That's happening, and I think that what was encouraging was that, at least in some of these instances, women could come forward, confide in male colleagues, expect and get support from them. That's positive. But I think what's really daunting is that even in those instances, we are seeing this terrible backlash where the women who have complained are being called stooges of politicians. The questions are being raised about their character, about their integrity, and it's clearly a very, very hard battle.
So the question is, what have you actually achieved in the last year of very vociferous campaigning? I'm just looking at a few stats here. One magazine which did undercover interviews with policemen found that 17 out of 30 policemen they talked to candidly said that they believed a majority of rape claims were false or actually about consensual sex. Then we had the former police commissioner in Mumbai saying that 90% of rape claims were false. How do you change the police?
I think that it has to start with accountability, and there's so little political will towards that. We have been talking about police reform and saying that police reform should mean, of course, less corruption in the police, it should mean freedom from political control, but above all it must mean that you make them accountable to what the Indian Constitution stands for, at least that much. Okay, because essentially it means a respect for human rights and for women's rights and so on. And it's
Has that started?
I think very, very little, and very little willingness to go that way. And I don't mean only the police, the judiciary. I think in both these we've seen in the past few months a really odious kind of sexist comments, justifications for rape, talking about how women who have premarital sex, you've had a judge in Delhi say that women who have premarital sex shouldn't cry rape, that kind of thing, that they have no business to cry rape. And you've had policemen display the kinds of attitudes that assume that unless a woman is battered to the point of nearly dying, she must be lying about having been raped. This is the assumption that operates.
Let me be very personal about this, because one has to be personal in a way. You live in Delhi. If you had the terrible misfortune to be sexually assaulted, would you have sufficient faith in the police to go to them and expect them to fully investigate and deliver justice on your behalf?
It's not a matter of faith. I think it's a matter of wanting to hold them accountable to what they are expected to stand for. So in my case, of course, I would. But what I'm saying is that for many women, it's a very, very hard choice to make, because if what is going to follow is a prolonged kind of humiliation, if even in order to achieve justice, you will have to prove your respectability, prove that you had some modesty or respectability, that was violated. Essentially, it becomes about your character, right from the police station right up to the courtroom. And I think changing that is a very hard thing in India and elsewhere as well. Yes.
Are you being a little unfair to the authorities in the sense that, because partly of the campaign that you and others have run over the last year, there have been efforts to change, particularly the judicial system, to speed up the process, fast-track rape cases, and also to toughen up the penalties for a whole series of sex crimes and rape? The Verner Commission came out with recommendations. Many of them are being implemented. Doesn't the government deserve some credit for that?
I think that the Verma